Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. We are diving into a region that I think is going to be increasingly important in the coming years.
Yeah.
The Indo-Pacific and India's role there.
The big one.
So listeners have been telling us that they want to, understand these complex topics, but they don't want to read a whole book or anything.
Yeah, they want this sort of express lane.
Exactly. This is going to be the express lane to India in the Indo-Pacific.
Perfect. Love it.
So what do you think is the main question that we should be trying to answer in this deep dive?
Well, I think we got to start with the why. Mm-hmm. Why is the Indo-Pacific so important?
Right.
And then I think what we really need to get to is, how is India trying to position itself strategically?
Yeah.
Given all the other players in the region and India's own economic and security interests.
And we're looking at this through the lens of this report called India's Role in the Indo-Pacific, Strategic Partnerships and Power Projection.
Yeah, that's our kind of jumping off point.
Okay, so let's start with the why. Okay.
The Indo-Pacific. Why does it matter so much?
Well, just look at the numbers. 60% of global trade flows through this region.
It's huge.
It's the connection between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. It's where major powers are all kind of jostling for position.
And you've got this, it's a big rivalry between India and China.
That's kind of the key dynamic.
That kind of shapes everything else.
Right. For India, the Indo-Pacific is not some far off, theoretical thing. It's about their own security. It's about protecting their trade routes. It's about, pushing back against China's assertiveness.
The strategic necessity.
Exactly, as the report says.
So they've got to do something.
Yeah, they can't just sit back and watch.
So what are they doing?
Well, partnerships are a huge part of it.
Okay.
We're not going it alone.
Right.
One of the biggest examples is the Quad.
The Quad, yeah.
Which brings together India, the U.S., Japan, and Australia.
So this is it's not like NATO. No, it's not a formal military alliance.
Right. It's more like
It's more of a platform for coordinating strategy.
Yeah.
Working together on things that they all agree on.
And we see this in the joint naval exercises.
Oh yeah, things like Exercise Malabar.
Yeah, where you've got these, these four massive navies operating together.
And that sends a message. It's a signal, particularly to China.
About cooperation.
Yeah. About, we're paying attention.
Yeah, and then you've got the growing ties between India and the U.S.
Oh, that's a really big one.
Yeah, and it's not just talk. It's real tangible stuff.
No, they're signing agreements. They're doing arms deals.
What are some of the key agreements that we should know about?
Well, I think, Beka Lamoa, Kamkasa.
Beka Lamoa, Kamkasa.
Those are kind of the foundation.
Let's take those down for us.
Okay, so BCA, that's about sharing geospatial intelligence.
Okay.
So, satellite imagery, that kind of thing.
So they're sharing, the U.S. is sharing its intel with India.
Right, exactly. Real-time stuff.
Okay.
Lemoa, that's about using each other's military bases.
So, if an Indian ship needed to refuel in, the Philippines or something.
Yeah, or a U.S. plane needed to land in India.
Right.
And then Kamkasa, that's about secure communications.
So their systems can talk to each other.
Exactly.
Okay, and then the arms deals.
Well, we've seen India buying Predator drones from the U.S.
Those are those unmanned aircraft.
Right, with long-range surveillance capabilities.
Right, and they're also buying helicopters.
Yeah, the MH-60R helicopters, which are really good for anti-submarine warfare.
So these are all signs that this partnership is actually, doing something.
It's not just words on paper.
Okay, so we talked about the Quad, we've talked about the U.S. What about the other countries in the region?
Well, ASEAN is really important.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
Yeah, India is trying to build stronger ties for a lot of those countries.
Especially on maritime security.
Yeah, Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines.
And there's this one port that's really interesting.
Oh yeah, Sabang Port in Indonesia.
Why is that one so important?
Well, it's right near the Malacca Strait.
Which is a major choke point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So much of China's trade has to go through there.
So India's presence there, even just through a partnership, is strategically significant.
Right. It complicates things for China.
Okay. And then there's France.
Oh, yeah. France.
People might not think of France as a major player in the Indo-Pacific.
Well, they have a lot of territory out there.
Right. They're resident power.
And they're working pretty closely with India.
On things like naval logistics.
Yeah. And joint patrols.
So it's all these different partnerships are kind of coming together.
Right. It's a web.
And it's all guided by India's own foreign policy goals.
Yeah, like Act East.
Act East. Okay.
Which basically means India is going to be much more proactive in engaging with the countries to its east.
Okay.
And then there's SAGAR.
What does that stand for?
Security and growth for all in the region.
Okay, so that's kind of a vision for a cooperative and inclusive
All right, everyone benefits.
approach to maritime security.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's talk about India's own military capabilities.
Okay.
And the report really emphasizes the Navy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Navy is key to India's Indo-Pacific ambitions.
And they've got this new aircraft carrier,
The INS Vikrant.
which is like a big deal.
Yeah, it's their first indigenously built carrier.
Wow, so they designed it and built it themselves.
Yeah, that's a major technological achievement.
And it means they can project power, much farther out.
Exactly. And they're already talking about building a third carrier.
Wow, so they're really serious about this.
They're trying to keep pace with China.
And then there's the submarine program.
Yeah, they're developing nuclear-powered attack submarines.
Oh, SSNs.
Right. Those are really important for countering China's growing undersea capabilities.
And then there's the Andaman and Nicobar Command.
Yeah, that's a really strategically important location.
It's like right near that Malacca Strait choke point.
Exactly. And it's a tri-services command.
So it's got Army, Navy, and Air Force all working together.
Right. It shows how seriously India takes this area.
And they're also, working on access agreements with other ports.
Yeah, like in Mauritius, Seychelles, Oman, Vietnam.
So they can operate further out in the Indian Ocean.
Right. It's all about expanding their reach.
So they're not just defending their own coastline.
No, they're projecting power.
Okay, so now we've got to talk about the big one.
The elephant in the room,
China.
right?
China's doing a lot in the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, the Belt and Road Initiative, the militarization of the South China Sea, their growing naval presence in the Indian Ocean.
So how is India trying to respond to all of that?
Well, they're doing a few things.
Okay.
They're building up their infrastructure in key areas,
Like where?
like the Northeast and the Andaman Nicobar Islands.
Okay, so that's about, being able to operate more effectively in those areas.
Right, and it also sends a signal, we're here.
Okay, and then there's the partnerships,
Right, the Quad, the U.S., Japan, Australia.
showing a united front.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then they're investing in the blue economy,
What does that mean?
basically using ocean resources sustainably for economic growth.
Okay.
And they're also really focused on maritime domain awareness.
So being able to track ships and potential threats.
Right. Knowing what's happening out there.
So it seems like they're taking a pretty balanced approach.
Yeah, they don't want conflict, but they're not backing down.
That's a good way to put it.
I think so.
So what's next? What do we think is going to happen in the future?
Well, the reports suggest a few things.
Okay.
I think we're going to see more joint military exercises.
With partners?
Yeah. And more technology transfer.
Okay, so sharing like cutting edge defense technology.
Right.
And what about the Quad?
I think that's going to get even stronger and potentially expand into new areas
Like what?
like cybersecurity and space security.
Right, because those are becoming increasingly important.
Absolutely.
And then India's own defense industry.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep building more ships.
Okay.
And they're going to start exporting more of their own defense equipment.
So they're going to become more self-reliant.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's the soft power aspect.
Right. India is playing a bigger role in disaster response and humanitarian aid.
So they're building goodwill in the region.
Yeah, it's a smart strategy.
So it seems like India is really transforming itself.
Yeah, they're going from a continental power to a maritime power.
And that has implications for the whole region.
Absolutely.
So to sum up, it seems like India is taking a really bold and deliberate approach to the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, they have to.
They can't afford to just sit back and watch.
Right, they have to be proactive.
So I'm curious, what do you think are the biggest implications of all of this?
Well, that's something for our listeners to think about.
Yeah.
What does India's growing maritime power mean for global stability?
Yeah.
What does it mean for trade?
What about, unforeseen challenges? What could go wrong?
Right, those are the big questions. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive into India and the Indo-Pacific. It's a complex issue, but hopefully this has helped you understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.